Okay, now we're officially recording. Okay, folks, welcome to this another fine edition of the Data Champions. And today's online discussion topic is Power BI. But before we get into the content of Power BI, just love to do a quick go round. And folks, and tell us what you're up to. What are your current data challenges and priorities? And I'll go in order of appearance today. So Steve, if you want to start us off.
Okay. Yeah, I just quickly jotted it down this morning. I am trying to create some user requirements for an application process on Salesforce for individuals, which is something that, sorry, I'm just being brought a cup of coffee, which is lovely, which is something that the Community Foundation Network has wanted for years, but we've never been able to get to it. So I've got a small team who are being very open-minded and positive about it, but nevertheless, because we are such a diverse bunch and we give grants for all kinds of things for individuals, people ask the same questions in 1,000 different ways. So to try and figure out how many questions we need and what fields they need to end up in Salesforce so that people can get a coherent grant record, even though essentially they are the same sorts of questions, is taxing. But I will get it done, because I promised myself, and I'm now visible to the network, that I will get this done. So progress is being made. Yeah, my only other comment was about Power BI, which I say I installed it a few weeks back. I checked that it connected to Salesforce, which was really the thing I wanted to see. And I know that Somerset has got a really good Power BI tool that works directly with Salesforce. So I am itching to be able to use it. So this couldn't come at a better time.
Cool. And we will dive into it. So Andy, what are your current priorities and challenges?
Well, we had a board meeting, I think it was on Monday, and I presented last year's grants data to them using 360 Giving Insights. And we just used that as a tool to talk through some of the insights from that, really. We discussed some of the limitations of it, but it was really interesting. I think our board were quite taken aback, actually, although they were aware of this and signed off an open data policy 18 months ago, to actually realise that all of this stuff is now out there in the wild. I think came as quite a nice surprise to them. I don't think anyone was sort of taken aback or shocked by it. But it was really good just to sort of gauge their reactions, and we talked a little about the possibilities that provides us going forward in terms of us taking a lead in our county in terms of open grants data and having dialogues with our local authorities at the various levels and the other funds that exist down here, and also possibilities for collaboration going forward. So that was actually quite affirming for me, having sort of spent quite a bit of time on this and then being quite happy where we are with it. So that was my win for the week in a way, which I'm quite happy with, and sort of sets me up now for sort of taking this journey forward a bit more.
That's great. That sounds super cool. Gareth, you're with us today. Cool.
Hi there. How's it going? Sorry, I'm a bit late.
No worries. You're just in time. We're doing a quick go round on what people are currently working on. And next up is Nicola.
Yes, I am in the process of redrafting our monitoring form in order to try to collect more sensible data from grant holders and present it in a format that's useful to us and is kind of proportionate to the size of the grant that we're making. So that's involving grappling with Form Builder on Salesforce, which has been no end of fun. But we're quite excited about the possibilities that will provide for us to just make better use generally of feedback from grants. So that will be a kind of an ongoing project, obviously, over the next year. And then the other thing is that we have a new sort of comms social media person in the team, and that's very exciting because it means that we can start to think about the sharing of some of the data driven insights and reports and work that we've been doing over the last little while. We've been without this person for about a year, and so it's exciting to be thinking about publishing an uncovered report and I'm sure you'll be very excited to hear that our series of needs reports that I've been working on based on local insight and other things over the last 6 months or so are going to be published weekly over the next few weeks to brighten up your week. And we're looking forward to sort of learning how useful they're going to be externally. So to the wider audience, they're clearly useful to us internally in terms of how they inform things. But it'll be interesting to get feedback on how they're used. We hope, for example, by organisations in our patch wanting to make grant applications and needing easy access to these kind of sort of facts and figures and analysis that can help support their work, because they obviously don't have the capacity necessarily to do all of that for themselves. So yeah, it'll be interesting to hear how that goes.
Sounds really good. Cool. Gareth, what are you up to?
So we've had a few new starters at UKCF, two new program officers. So I'm line managing one of them at the moment, and we're looking at how we're going to restructure slightly so that they have a little bit more autonomy, and the program managers, which is Lily and myself, and obviously Vicky being the director, have a little bit more time to be a bit more strategic rather than being stuck in lots of kind of more procedural stuff. But we've been using a lot of different methodologies and ways to try to identify what processes we already use, and also what things we need to streamline in order for it to be really useful for them, and kind of, for everyone to be able to kind of work on their own things without relying on the knowledge of the person who's sitting next to you that's ill or has been hit by a bus or something like that. So we're trying to do that. So we're sharing more information about the programs internally, and each all having a bit of ownership over it. So that's been a kind of like a big. There's been some good minds in the programs team that are kind of very methodical and logical. So they're working through ways of displaying that kind of data. I suppose we had quite an interesting preliminary success. Lily and I, there's a possibility of some funding coming from a funder that we've worked from before, and we were kind of having a bit of a hard time trying to figure out. It's a fairly open call, and we were trying to figure out the best way to propose something that would work for us, would work for the CFs, and work for the whole network, so that we're not kind of pitching to something that groups or that CS wouldn't feel happy to engage with. And I think that Lily and I both sat down yesterday, and it was interesting the way we worked through, without necessarily looking at data, we used our kind of knowledge of feedback and data that we got in from previous programs, and kind of just fairly holistically pulled together this proposal that we actually think sounds quite logical, but it was more because we'd been immersed in that data and the information so much through previous programs and through previous iterations of this funder's work, that we just kind of came together with something quite logical. But it was only because we'd been working with it and working with the data and looking at feedback and looking at numerous sources of feedback and data that we found that we felt quite confident in pulling together this concept. But it was definitely just kind of, it felt like it was plucked out of the air, but we know that it wasn't, because it's definitely based on things that we know to be true through our conversations or through the feedback or through the data that we've collected. So it's very, very, very early stages. We haven't even got it outside of the programs department at the moment, but we'll see how it goes. Could be interesting.
Could you give just a one sentence on what that project would be able to accomplish if it were funded?
So very simply, and I think without kind of letting too much out before we go and consult with the wider network, I think what I wanted to do is that there were problems in relation to CFs engaging with groups, because the concept that was being kind of presented was a little bit amorphous, and in actual fact what groups really need is core costs and support. And so what we thought we could do is actually target those groups that we felt have not been able to engage with a certain program in the past because it's a little bit too complex, or it's a little bit too beyond their capacity, and offer them slightly more money and offer 50% core costs and 50% kind of development, opportunities. So they, in one hand, have the opportunity to kind of just sustain themselves for a number of months or a year or however much, money it costs for them to run their project. And then in the other side, it kind of pleases the funder and the more strategic and the more kind of aspirational programs elements, by giving them the opportunity to use that money to either invest in the time that they need to develop this other element of the program, or to bring in training, or to be supported in another way to kind of start to think more creatively. So it's kind of like, it's not, I know that everyone just wants core costs, but that's not possible in this fund. So why don't we try to do a bit of both and please both sides of the spectrum? But we'll see.
Sounds really cool.
Yeah.
Anybody, any questions for anybody about what they're working on? Nope. I forgot me. Oh my God, you guys. I was in Ottawa 2 weeks ago with Moore and a couple of other people for the Open Government Partnership Summit. And one of the things that happened, the thing there, is that we launched, this book was launched, The State of Open Data. Yeah, you will notice, edited by, there's Moore Rubenstein is right there. And also our buddy Tim Davies, who we do a lot of work with and actually is a neighbor, lives right by me in Stroud. Anyways, I have a chapter in here on that I wrote with a colleague named Marielle Garcia Montez, and it's on data literacy. And it's all online. I'll share the link with it later, but that was quite, we did this, plus I ran an unconference there right in front of the OGP Summit, where we brought people together to talk about how to make data work for open government. And of course, open data was a huge theme in that. And so actually I've been writing a lot of reports and trying to get my head around what happened when we brought 140 people together for a day without an agenda except to talk about data literacy, and now just trying to capture everything that happened. But one of the things that was quite exciting is that they came up with this open data oath for governments that are trying to go down the open government line to help educate them in terms of how to do open data and all that. So that's quite exciting. And then I'm getting ready to go to Tunis on Sunday to work with a group called the Egyptian Social Progress Indicators. And basically it's really complicated project where they've been pulling data in under 6 different topics, which are things like labor, agriculture, government, all sorts of stuff, to look at how civil society is forming in Egypt and how they can use these indicators, this collection of data, to help drive better civil society in Egypt. So they've had a first phase, and we're going to spend next week evaluating their first phase and looking at how the data is being used and all that. So it should be quite super interesting. So anyways, that's me in a nutshell. So I'll be totally honest with you guys. I've never used Power BI. I don't have a clue, but it has come up so often in our conversations that, and I've been trying to get people to do more driving around it, and unfortunately Kate, who seemed to be the one that was like really driving the conversation, she has been so swamped that it became obvious that we couldn't do it. So I thought, well, let's just do a thing on Power BI, and I was really excited by your guys' responses. There's obviously people like Steve, yourself, trying to figure it out. Those of you like Andy, maybe a little further down the line, and Gareth. So I thought what might be a really good first question to start this off with is, I don't know a thing about Power BI. Tell me, you guys, why should I be interested in Power BI? What might it do for me?
If I can kick off based on what I've seen of it, is I'm mainly focused on our Salesforce data, but that's just the start. It seems to be able to directly access data from Salesforce, so there's no need to extract it from one place, put it into another. And it can create far more sophisticated dashboards than what we have within Salesforce. So at the moment, the dashboards are quite fixed. You just define what you want them to tell you, and they display a pretty chart, but you can't change that chart unless you go in and access the underlying data and manipulate it. Whereas Power BI seems to be able to bring up an interface very similar to 360 in giving insights, which means you just move a slider and the data changes on the screen. So, if we were in a board meeting and wanted to talk about our grants data, Andy's done it, we've started to do it here, and just say, well, what happens if we take out the older groups? You can do it on the fly within Power BI and alter your data and answer questions without having to do an awful lot of work in the background. So I'm thinking I want to create far more interactive dashboards for this organization so that we can understand what we're doing and what our workloads are and whether we need to be planning better, all of that kind of stuff. I just think it seems to be a far more alive way of accessing your data.
My question in that is, though, so in terms of a dashboard, like, do you guys see it as something that could be used more broadly within staff, so they could, like, outside of yourselves, or do you just see it right now as a way for you to be showing data, given the sort of questions and stuff like that that's coming to you? Like, do you think it could be more broadly used, or just by you guys?
I think it can. I mean, we're looking at it in terms of setting up our sort of KPIs and things for our board reports and everything like that. So I think once it's set up, it can be quite applicable to a number of functions within the community foundation. As has already been said, I mean, it talks to Salesforce. It's very easy to link the two together. And so there's live data being pulled across from it, which I think is very good. It clearly does a lot more than the dashboard function that Salesforce provides. So I think I think what's clear, this type of data visualization, however you do it, is really quite powerful for a lot of people. It's so much more accessible than trying to present raw data or anything. So I think it has quite a lot of applications.
Coming back to what I think you're getting at there, Dirk, is I understand that you can publish web pages with it if you've got the sort of more expensive package, and I would be quite happy, assuming confidentiality or whatever was maintained, that we could publish our data directly to our website, so that other people could manipulate our data in much the same way as they could with 360 Insights. I'd be happy to do that as long as I was sure of there was no direct link back to Salesforce, so they couldn't get in. But I'd be happy to share that stuff.
Well, that gets into another realm in terms of the, like, opening up data, your own data, and how do you make your own data accessible to your community and things like that, and how might that be valuable? So I think that's super cool to be thinking about. Anything else in terms of what it does or what it's been able to do for people?
Like I say, I've never used it. Someone did talk about it yesterday, but I think that was because there's some tools in there that you can kind of create visualizations and things like that. So, but yeah, no, we've never used it here.
And in the use of it for Salesforce, right? Is it does it come as a, like, ready-made plugin for Salesforce? Like, is there like an official connection between the two?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You just connect it up. You put in your user ID and your password, and then all the data tables appear in Power BI. And you can either access directly the data tables, which is quite overwhelming, or you can access reports that you've already written in Salesforce, so you can already start to funnel your data down before Power BI accesses it. For me, I couldn't quite get to the next stage, which was how do I analyze the data. I've used Microsoft Access in the past, but it didn't it didn't quite seem to work in the same way. So I've got to get beyond that hurdle.
Wow, Access, that's a blast from the past.
Well, I'm still using that.
Well, yeah, no, we need to use the things that work,
yeah.
Regardless of where they're at. Nicola, just wondering if you had anything to add or have any experience with it.
Don't have any experience of it at all, and it's interesting to hear what people are saying about the way in which it links with Salesforce. So it sounds quite an appealing option there. So I'm just listening in to gather some insights, really.
Yeah, I also like the bits of this thing of like what's the potential it does do for being able to interact with data, but how are we actually thinking about access to data, and does it help with any of that? So it sounds to me like at Andy and Steve, you have direct experience with it. Steve, it sounds like you're starting out. Andy, do you have like what are the specific things you've actually used it for?
So I think I'm probably at quite a similar stage to Steve, actually. So as we've already said, linking data is very easy. I was using it with some reports that I'd run, which seemed a more manageable approach. I'm not sure if it's the right approach, but it seemed the right way to do it. And that then draws the data in, and then there's a whole load of options for sort of styling and filtering that data and producing different types of charts and images and so on. But that's kind of where I got stuck with it, to be honest with you. I could get it nearly to do what I wanted it to do, but then I couldn't work out how to actually produce what I was looking for. So yeah, I've got that hurdle as well, which I sort of gave up at that point, to be honest, and I need to find a bit of time to look at it again.
Okay.
Can I just ask, Andy, you've been using it for reporting and board reports and the like, and you mentioned filtering there, because one of the things that is limiting with using not Salesforce dashboards, which we don't really use a lot of, but pulling data into Excel, and then it's fairly straightforward to filter pivot tables and the like. So for example, if you wanted to look at different years of data and make comparisons, or we have, for example, one grant making program which is huge and completely skews all our grant making data if it's included within any of those tables. But sometimes you want it in, sometimes you want it out, and so I tend to build all my pivot table charts with a filter for this particular program, so I can kind of whip it in and out. But obviously, as soon as you move any of those tables out of Excel into board documents and that kind of thing, then you can't any longer do any filtering, and the Excel spreadsheets are not fit for public consumption. Mine are really horrendous and messy. So I'm sensing that this might be a helpful way to be able to present those kind of things where you do need to be able. It would be really helpful for end users to be able to use the filters and to sort of switch between including this giant grant or excluding it. Those kind of things could be made much more manageable. Is that right?
I know, certainly. Again, I'm still sort of playing around with it, so I'm not going to speak with any authority here at all. But you can certainly use filters and groupings and so on, and it's not dissimilar to using Excel in the way that functions. All I've looked at it from at the moment is sort of the back end dashboard and building those reports up. What I haven't seen is what the end user can do with it, whether that then is static or not. I haven't actually sort of produced the end result, if you like. So I don't know if the end result is then, I think it's dynamic. That's how I understand it, but I haven't quite got to that point yet.
Okay. If I can come in here, I have seen a fully dynamic tool working. So me and Gareth, we sit on the Maximising Technology Committee, which principally looks at Salesforce for the network, but is also looking at other technologies. One of the other people on there is Vicky from Somerset, and they had a third party build them a fully working dashboard for their opportunities, so their donor pipeline. Now, I've literally seen this for about 45 seconds on a laptop, but taking the data straight from Salesforce, they have got filters down the left-hand side, and by just dragging bars to look at certain things or change time periods, amounts or whatever, the charts modify on screen immediately. So what you're building is it looks like an application rather than a spreadsheet, which can present a very glossy interface, but as soon as you want to do anything, you've got to go into the guts of it to start altering the data set. So it overlays a very sophisticated interface on data, which allows a layperson who doesn't understand what's going on underneath it to answer their own questions within reason. So that's where I want to get. I think that we will be a lot better in this organization if more people could interact with data, even if they don't quite understand where it's coming from. So if we can build these dashboards, these live tools, senior management, grants team leaders, development people can all be looking at different bits of data and just moving sliders and finding out what they need to know.
That's a really, really helpful distinction, Steve, between understanding and interacting with. I hadn't thought about it in that way, and I think that's absolutely right. People don't need to be a complete expert in the back end, do they? But they do need to be able to use it intelligently and ask and answer questions through it.
I think at the moment when I've because of this work we're doing, you'll find most offices have got a guru, one person who they go, I need a report on so and so. Oh, go and ask whoever, they'll get it for you. And we're fortunate we have 2 people in this office that can really do that, maybe 3 at a push. But it would be nice if everyone could interact with data at some level. And that's where I think Power BI can take us to. Someone's going to have to do the hard work initially, but then we'll create this system that people can access. Just coming on to how we can share this, because clearly there's no one on this call that's an expert. We have got it on the next Maximising Technology Committee agenda to have Vicky demonstrate her dashboard so we can see exactly how that works. And there's also Hannah from Sussex. Yeah. So I have to get, who's also been using Power BI as well and has certainly got some functional work, some things working in it. So we're going to get that demonstrated, and I think we'll see where we need to go next to share it with the network. Because if Somerset have had theirs built for them, it may be that company could build some other dashboards. If it just bolts straight onto Salesforce, I'm going to get Somerset's dashboard and lay it over our data because it's using the same underlying data tables that we're using, the opportunities. So actually you can share this stuff the same way as you can share reports in Salesforce. You could just share Power BI dashboards because it's just accessing Salesforce data. And I think we could quite quickly build up some really useful tools for the network.
So let me just see if I get this right. The problem that it seems to be attempting to solve is this thing of having to do the filtering. So like taking data, you don't have to take the data then out of Salesforce, put it into a spreadsheet, do the filtering, right, and then putting overlays on that. It lets you interact with that directly, and the strive that everybody sort of wants to get to is to allow everybody on staff to have that access to where they can manipulate or filter data, right, and get the answers to the questions that they have immediately, rather than having to like go through a guru or somebody else to actually do it, right?
I think so.
Yeah, no, that sounds. I mean, yeah, that's also the interesting thing to me in terms of what is happening right now, where there's always somebody sort of on staff that becomes the sort of that data guru person that in some ways can become the bottleneck, right, for the entire staff to be becoming more, doing that better interactive with the data. Yeah, so that is super interesting. The one piece I wanted to understand though too, this thing that you brought up, Steve, around you're getting it so far and being able to do analysis. So what's the problem with it in terms of doing analysis and things like that you've come across?
Okay, I mean, I suppose I'm a typical bloke in that I'm not very good at reading instructions, and most things I've gone through life, and just you poke around enough places with it, and eventually you start to get somewhere. I didn't find it intuitive straight off. I managed to connect to the data. I could see the data, but I couldn't create anything particularly interesting off it. I think if I can get a working tool from somebody else and disassemble it, then I'll be able to say, now I understand how it works. The alternative is, of course, I get a book or I go on a course. I prefer to go on a course if there is one, because I'm not good at reading lots of pages. It's just getting over that hurdle. So far I'm self-taught on Excel, I'm self-taught on Access. I just haven't had the time or the inspiration, I guess, to really figure out Power BI yet. So that
That's
I just that little push, about an hour with somebody who knows what they're talking about, hopefully will be enough for me to get on with it.
Andy, I'm wondering if your experience with it is similar.
Yeah, I would echo that entirely, to be honest with you. I've been playing around with it basically, and you kind of get to a point where you can't sort of go any further, and you need to spend more time with it, or just need some input from outside, and that's kind of where I stopped, to be honest.
Cool. I mean, that is a thing that's always really interesting to me in terms of the things that tend to get used wisely are the things that you don't really need an instruction manual to use. And there is the bit. I mean, I'm not sure it's just blokes, Steve. There's I look at things like Facebook, and the reason I think people are able to use it is because they can just sort of open it up and start interacting with it, and it's pretty becomes pretty self-evident really quickly how to use it. And you don't really need the instruction manual. So those are the things that tend to be able to take off on it. But I also think there's this level of people being able to show each other how to use stuff and all that. So I think that thing with getting Vicky to demo her dashboard, I'm sure will put you light years ahead, both in terms of very much in terms of dashboards. And where you guys need to head in terms of understanding dashboards and staff interaction with it, but perhaps also with what you can do with a tool like Power BI and what you cannot do with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we can, it's finding who's got the knowledge at a fair price, I think, for us. And if we can find that this organisation that built theirs could perhaps do a webinar for the network, then let's have that. Let's pay them for a couple of hours work just to demonstrate something very simple, just to get people to use it. But we have done webinars on all manner of things, and I think we need to do more to share a basic level of knowledge, and then people can develop from that if they want to, if they're interested. I mean, there's lots of foundations that don't use the dashboards within Salesforce at all, and they are hugely useful. But once you've just started using them, you think, I want to go a bit further. I want to start impressing our board with data. They really struggle with it. I said last time that they can't grasp it, but to quickly visualize things, you can share a lot more information a lot more quickly.
Well, so Nicola, do you have, just in that, because I think you said before that you don't use the dashboards in Salesforce.
Yep, right. Sorry. No, we don't. We've sort of started looking into it, but we tend to just kind of botch things together in an ad hoc way. It's not an excellent strategy, but actually at the moment we are in the process of, as it happens, redesigning our board reporting, the powers that be are very keen on that being a very visual experience and much less wordy, in order to help the board sort of see the wood for the trees, really. it sort of strikes me that this is a good moment to be thinking about Power BI actually, and that might be a useful way of kind of looking into it and understanding how best we can represent stuff. So I would think, Steve, you're absolutely right. It would be really great to have somebody who knows what they're talking about give us a couple of hours of their time in order to sort of be up and running. My question, I suppose, is so Somerset have had somebody build a dashboard for them, or whether that was simply because they felt it would be useful and quicker to get somebody else to do it, or whether that is beyond the means of mere mortals to do that themselves, because obviously there are always things that you want to change and customize, and I'd be happier adopting something where we had at least a rudimentary ability to be able to build things and change things ourselves. So I suppose that's what I'd want to get out of a demonstration or a webinar, is to understand how feasible that's likely to be.
Just to be clear, here in Somerset, we've not had anything built with Power BI, so I'm not sure which CF that is.
Sorry, why do I keep calling it? It's Wiltshire, isn't it? Not Somerset.
Oh, right, sorry.
Sorry, Andy. I get confused. I don't go out of Essex much.
So Wiltshire have had. So as far as you know, Wiltshire's had somebody in who built something for them.
They did. It's an external consultant. They did it gratis, and I know it only looks at their opportunities at the moment. And maybe I'm overselling it, but based on the fact that it was using just Salesforce data, I was like, wow, that's an impressive step forward. And there are many other data visualization tools. I know, Andy, obviously you presented on them last time. I think the only reason why we're focused potentially thinking about Power BI is because you can get it for nothing, and it will fit in well with Office 365, which most of us are using. But it may be that it's not actually the best thing. I don't know. But I'm just struck at the moment that visualizing data is so much better than analyzing it in a great stream of numbers and reports. And I think that's got to be the way that we go. So finding a tool that can do that is where I want to be.
Well, that's also interesting to get back to Gareth's earlier point on the project that you've been putting together. You actually seems like most of the data that you've been using for that has been in your guys' head, and not necessarily coming from different data sets at this point. But that's all the thing of like understanding how we interact with data, right? And how does it come to us and all that. And but I think what's really interesting to me about this discussion is there's just this strong desire amongst everyone to have these dashboards that allow everyone to get beyond the spreadsheet and things like that people can't really function that well with, and be able to do the data visualizations on the fly so that people can have this sort of data at their fingertips type of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's when it gets so sorry. And I always come back to this thing when you're like when you start talking about a tool where you actually come back to like what is the real need, what is the real problem and all that, and it's often better to be focusing on that rather than the tool. But that said, when you do get that tool like Power BI that is free, there's some connections to Salesforce that's already where you're doing it. It's good to have that deep dive on the tool itself. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think you're right. There's nothing worse than finding a product and then trying to wrap a solution around it because it looks good. You do need to understand what your problem is. But what I found is sometimes you don't know what you're missing until you see something else and you go, that's such a leap forward. I want some aspects of that in my job. But I think at the moment, data, a lot of people are afraid of data. And as soon as you start going deep into anything that we produce, the grants data where one grant program can throw the whole statistics out. It's making data more accessible to a wider bunch of people, and the questions that brings and the insights that brings, that I think I'm trying to get to. As I say, Power BI might not be the solution to that, but if it's not too difficult it might make you ask other questions that go, actually, you know what, this is the completely wrong way to go. We need to be over here. But at least that helped us frame our question, which is what 360 Insights did. We thought we were funding loads of small organisations that were very young and new, and actually it turns out that we were really risk-averse grant maker. Discuss. So, that was just a very easy thing, that just simply visualising some data in a tool we'd never even asked for made us suddenly go away and think about it. So I'm hoping that's what it'll help us to do.
I love that though as an aspiration. Yeah, you want to be able to get people to have different understandings of maybe their work and all that by having access to the data, but not necessarily like just letting them play with it, right? So that I think that was the thing for you. That was your discovery with 360 Giving stuff, as you were just playing with it, right? To see what it could tell you. And that's all sort of part of the journey. There's the thing too, in terms of, when you are engaging a tool like Power BI, right? You're sort of looking at it in terms of the like, well, what problems are you going to solve for me? Right. And it's part of the journey. So, getting back to the like, okay, well, I've heard good things about this, and so maybe I'll use it. Just being able to open it up and start playing with it will get you further along in the journey and maybe help you understand those questions that you might have, right, in a different way. So just looking at the time and thinking,
Sorry.
No, you guys, this is great. I think one question I just wanted to ask, for, I guess, on behalf of Gara and Nicola, where should they start?
I would just turn it on. To be honest, just download the desktop version, which, as we said, is free. I think you'll see very quickly how to link it to Salesforce. I think it seems best to me to start with a report that you've built in Salesforce already, which I think most people already use. Just bring that across and see how far you can get until you get stuck. There's also some really good. I was just looking on the website. Actually, there's some whole range of videos on the Power BI website about doing different things, which I've not looked at yet, and it may just be worth spending a bit of time on those and seeing what they offer.
Cool.
Yeah, I did manage to download a book from a Kindle book for free, but it's 300 pages, which immediately put me off. So, but you can, there are free resources out there. So yes, I'm sure actually just doing something on a website. I think if you can get hold of some sample data and work through a tutorial, that's probably what I should be doing instead of talking about it. But yeah, definitely just start. We'll definitely follow this up at the next committee meeting that we have, which is on the 10th of July. And if we think there's any possibility of a webinar for the network, then we'll get somebody to do it. But I think it probably will be an external contributor with a community foundation saying how they've used it, which will be Wiltshire talking about it, and not Somerset. Although you're welcome to talk about it, Andy.
So just Nicola and Gareth, to bring you guys in, what are you thinking now in terms of what your path forward might be with using this?
So I'm assuming that you need to be pretty sure that your data is good and secure and everything in Salesforce before it's just a kind of visualization tool, isn't it?
Yeah, the desktop version obviously doesn't go anywhere. There is a cloud version, so you can publish to publicly accessible websites, but that's a different package. So at the moment,
I'm thinking more in terms of the raw data or the data that's in Salesforce. The reports that you pull out or that you kind of load into it, you need to be sure that they're showing you what you want to see and kind of, and the data is secure, and all that kind of stuff before.
Yeah, I wouldn't get bogged down in security. I mean, I think what would happen is sometimes when you visualize data, you go, that doesn't look right. So is either there's something wrong with the data, or you've written your report incorrectly.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I think that our data never looks right to me. So so I'm always having to like go through it about 5 times, and then we end up like pulling it out and like doing VLOOKUPs and stuff like that. Because especially often, I think it's quite difficult for us because we do often have so many community foundations feeding into one program that we have so much data that it's actually impossible then to really do anything but do it kind of automatically, get the report out. And then, so for I Will, which has always been the bugbear recently, is, when there's over 1,500 grants, there's no way at any point you can kind of think, right, well, let's manually check that this is correct. And I know that, you never really want to be doing that with any data anyway, because to a certain extent, because you want to just be able to kind of access it and analyze it rather than kind of worry about whether or not it's showing everything you want it to show and stuff. So it's just that kind of, because I don't feel that we're necessarily that strong or that confident about how our Salesforce package works here at UKCF. Like, I just feel that we'd need to get that sorted before we started visualizing data that I don't feel confident about anyway.
Okay.
But yeah, but I mean, it's definitely something it's definitely the kind of dream to be able to just pull this out and access it really easily. Maybe we can start to do it at that point even more. Just work on massive programs like I Will, but it feels very difficult to kind of be sure that you're looking at the right stuff. But so maybe we'll try it on a smaller program that's more manageable.
Cool. That's good. Nicola, what are you thinking your next steps are?
Well, I'm going to download it. That's my next task, and have a play around, and might use some of the board reporting. We have a board meeting on Monday, and so when the board has seen the kind of mock-ups of the things that we're hoping to report to them and commented on them, that sounds like the ideal opportunity to have a muck about and see if we can do that in Power BI in a way which makes our lives easier and is more accessible to them. So yes, it's just the right moment. And yeah, if there is a possibility for a webinar or additional input from the way in which the other CFs have used it, that'd be fantastic. So thank you.
Cool. This is our final Data Champions online discussion, and I'm actually getting a little teary just thinking about these rich discussions that we've had. So I really just and the 4 of you, I have to say, I am quite thankful for. You are each people that I've interviewed in the for the roundup and recommendations moving forward, and just to say that you guys have provided me with some really great insights. I am going to be now working on doing the recommendations and the report for moving forward, which of course we will share. I think there's streams in terms of how does this feed into UKCF's programming? How does this feed into existing stuff? Like, I have to say that if I was going to do another one of these online discussions, the next thing I would do is dashboards, because the thing that this thing has brought out is this idea of like, how do we enable other people within the organization to interact with data and be able to ask questions on their own and do that illuminating, and what does that actually look like? But that said, it sounds like there might be possibilities for that conversation to be happening, or might already be happening in a number of different ways. So that's exciting. Also, so the report there, UKCF, has its strand of stuff. 360 Giving, like I said, is going to be replicating the program. The last conversation I had with Moore is about to be going on maternity leave, is that their look at it is for all foundations. They want to replicate the program for foundations, all foundations in the UK. So it wouldn't be discluding community foundations at this point. but looking at sort of the broader thing. So that's where they want to head with the program, and we're going to be looking at doing a kickoff event and all that. So you guys will definitely get invites for all of that. And what else to say? Oh, just that, yeah, you guys have given some great ideas, though, I think, in terms of the how do we work together as a collective. So one thing that's been coming up several times in these conversations has been, how do we pool for a training? How do we pool for a tool or something like that? So how can the collective of data champions actually, do things like bring down pricing and get the right trainings, get the right tools and all that, and working together on that, which I think has been fantastic. The other thing too that I really liked, I think Andy, you were the one that gave me this idea, but being able to provide support to people within foundations to do their own workshops around data, right? So being able to help data champion, like just do that support in terms of developing the agenda, running it, follow up, all of the above, to help their communities become more data informed, and so thus easier to work with. So that's some of the stuff that just off the top of my head is going to be going into the recommendations and things that we'll be looking to do also with this larger program with 360 Giving. So with that, just is there any other things to add at this point on our last online discussion before we wrap this up?
Just thanks to you, Dirk, really. You've convened things really effectively, and it's been a really great opportunity to build relationships and share ideas, and I'm sure there'll be a legacy of some kind. So I really appreciate the opportunity. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for that. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, I'd second that, and I do think I've noticed certainly in the last 12 months or so, where a smaller number of community foundations come together and share stuff, I think it's a really strong, positive way for us to learn from each other. So we need to do more of this for all sorts of things, but it's been really useful.
Cool.
Yep, I agree. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been really good, and I think, I mean, as someone who's fairly new to the network as well, it's been good to see that there's a lot going on and a lot of interesting thoughts and people out there really trying to make differences within their own community foundations, but then also how that can influence the wider network. So definitely, and we're always happy at UKCF if people are enjoying and getting on well with the things that we're trying to convene and trying to bring people in. So it's
great. Thank you. Cool. Andy?
Yeah, I would just echo what everyone else has said of messages of thanks. And, I think this has been a really helpful exercise just to focus my mind periodically throughout the last year or so. And I think, it's really starting to move us forward in the way we work down here, which has been really helpful.
Great. Thank you so much for that, you guys. And just one thing to add in terms of my learnings, I think the bit in terms of, the most critical thing for any network are the people within the network. And I think the thing that has been really critical for this initiative is that, you guys have gotten to know each other. But most importantly, you guys have actually developed a little bit of a culture of trust between each other. And so, the conversations as we have moved on have become more open, honest, and willing to share both the horror stories, but also the successes and honestly of what's going on in your foundations. And I think that's the bit that just it's really tough to get to that point where people have that trust. And to your point, Steve, it is about, often that is easier with a smaller group of people. But if you start off with a smaller group of people and start that off with the culture and then build on top of that, often that's hopefully that trust can be replicated. So I just have to thank you guys for showing up to all of these. I have always just loved every one of these conversations we've had. They've always been super rich, and just grateful that you guys, have been a part of it. So thank you very much for that. And with that, I will let everyone go and to the rest of your days and more from us soon. So talk to you soon.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Yeah, see you soon. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.